So now that you're holding the three things you want to be or be more of, I have a quote from the wildly popular Apple TV show, Ted Lasso. How many of you watch Ted Lasso? Probably not a huge amount. Okay. I just know I know a lot of people don't have Apple TV. But Ted is the head coach of a professional soccer team in the United Kingdom. Roy Kent was a player on the team, and he had to retire from playing, but now he and Ted are coaching together. This is, it is a very funny show because it's really about our core nature, but it can also be sort of crass, and the characters are sort of exaggerated. Roy has a fair number of problems, and I mean like a lot. He lost a relationship with the love of his life because of his bad behavior. But he has spent the last year trying to change. He's really focusing on what is her happiness about? What are her needs? What would he need to truly manifest? I mean, he is sincere, but he has setbacks. And he had one, and he's despondent. And this is a very short little clip between Roy Kent and Ted is very wise. And Roy says, "For the past year, I've been busting my ass trying to change, but apparently it hasn't done anything, because I'm still me." And Ted says, "Wait, did you want to be somebody else?" And Roy says, "Yeah, someone better. Can people change?" So this sermon is actually the third in a three-part series of Don't Be a Perfectionist sermons that I've been preaching this summer because I couldn't cram it all in one, so it had to go in three. But if you read the description, you might think I'm going to talk about rhinos and unicorns, but not really. Mostly, we're going to focus on the thoughts of Reverend Nadia Bolz-Weber and the ancient Toltec wisdom interpreted by Don Miguel Ruiz, some of which you just heard, because we're pursuing this question, can people really change? And if so, how do you do that? So Nadia Bolz-Weber is a Christian minister, and I fell in love with her when I read her blog titled, "Judas Will Hear Your Confession Now." For any of you who think I said Jesus, I did not. Judas will hear your confession now. So I was hooked. And she brings up Judas from time to time because she believes God lives in the really nitty-gritty, dark places as well as in the sunshine. She also believes that a truly accepting, forgiving community would have saved Judas. So she puts that before us from time to time. And this morning I'm leaning into her sermon, which is titled, "Can People Change?" Because I will tell you, every minister who watched that Ted Lasso clip, as we were sitting there watching that last episode, that little vignette came by and we were all said, "There's a sermon in that." And sure enough, she popped right into my feed. So I want to read a couple of things from her. She is telling about walking her pilgrimage on the El Camino Trail, and she's explaining it to some people. And she says, "I am still me. I'm in middle age, and I can finally say that. For the most part, I'm okay with it. Sure, there are still some jagged edges that continue to snag on the fabric of my life. There is a downside to nearly every good thing about me. But no one escapes this life without carrying a whole load of contradictions about themselves. It's kind of the only thing that makes us interesting enough to have stories to tell." So she is in a 12-step recovery and yoga retreat in India. And her experience there is, I'm still me, even though I'm in the holiest place, one of the holiest places on the earth. And she says, "I don't know how you can ever solve the conundrum of human transformation. Because whatever happens in your life, glorious or devastating, you will still in the end be you." At lunch, one of the retreatants comments, "If I could only be like Rolf, our meditation leader. I want to be as calm as him. But the thing is, says Nadia, I could meditate just as much as Rolf and still never look like him. I'd just be a version of me who meditates more. This is the rhino approach, the busting your head, the sweating, the striving, and the overexerting ourselves. If we could work out harder and longer, we could be different, is the lie we tell ourselves. I, like everyone else, I hope that I get hooked into the advertisements. I look at the Pilates teacher and the yoga teacher, and I say, if I just meditate enough or exercise enough or spend enough time in reflection, I'll be more like them. So we have Nadia on one side who tells us, try to get comfortable that you are always going to be you. And then we have ancient Toltec wisdom that's interpreted by Don Miguel Ruiz. Toltec beliefs come from a group of people who lived in the Mexican Valley in Central America 950 to 1160 before the Common Era, so 3,000 years ago and before the Aztec invasion. As the reading earlier describes, Toltec wisdom and practice teaches us we can be guided out of suffering and return to our true nature. The true nature includes happiness, freedom, and love. Our true nature is good. But Ruiz teaches the Toltec wisdom that all of those other voices is what gets in the way. Much effort must be applied to toning down the voices in order to hear the real you. And the process really means accepting our imperfections. Therefore, personal change means getting rid of the messages that others have placed upon you and constantly working with these questions. Is it my true self responding, or is it some conditioning I have? So self-trust is the key in this approach. And Ruiz asserts, and of course social scientists approved, that when we're children, the rules and expectations of society and those around us shape us through this rewards and punishment. And also, in combination of that, is there's not a lot of reinforcement of our direct observations, and there's very little time spent on the art of discernment. It's so effective, he says, our societal conditioning, that we become our own auto-domesticator. So not just the domesticator, you are the auto-domesticator. But the 4 commitments move us away from this constant tape of the auto-domesticator till our true self is uncovered. So here are the 4 things, the 4 shorthand things, there's so much more in that book, that Ruiz and Toltec wisdom teach. Be impeccable with your word. Okay, that sounds a little perfectionistic, but we have to learn to prepare our minds for the seeds of love and not fear. Ruiz chose the word impeccable. He did not choose that lightly. He informs us that it comes from the Latin peccatus, which means sin, and im is without. But he's using sin very differently than what we would traditionally think of in Christianity. And there I am, lumping all of Christianity into one bowl. What he's asking is that we make it our top priority to be impeccable with our language, meaning learning to take responsibility for our actions without shaming and blaming ourselves. So it's not an arrival. You are learning to take responsibility, to speak with integrity and think about our words before saying them aloud. Because how often have we said something, it's out there, and we can't take it back? Second is don't take anything personally. And this is allowing hurtful words and treatment from others roll off of you instead of letting them take up residence inside your mind. Understand that their words and actions, so often that is about the internal process of the person heaping criticism on you. It's not about you at all. It's about their internal self-criticism, which they have then dumped on you. Third is making assumptions based on not enough information, because Ruiz says that always has us engaging in false belief. The human mind, as we know later, it's like we knew this in ancient wisdom and now we have science to prove it. But the human mind wants to justify things. It wants to understand things. It wants a super quick answer because that reduces anxiety. But so having an answer, even if it's the wrong one, makes us feel less anxious. So Ruiz is saying, be careful to not make assumptions. So this is what I found works in my own life, is to ask questions about the speaker, to the speaker, so that you can understand more deeply and more broadly. Don't take the superficial explanation. If you have time to find out more information, then take the time. I like asking, what is really going on here? What isn't being said? Who are the stakeholders? Who does this all impact? And my favorite this year that I'm working on, what am I not seeing? So the don't making assumptions, asking questions of yourself or the other people helps you with that. And 4 is always do your best. And this is at the heart of the sermon, agreement number 4. Ruiz explains, when you do your best, you don't give the judge inside you the opportunity to find you guilty, the opportunity to blame you. If you've already done your best and the judge is in there chatty, trying to judge you, you've got an answer. I did my best, and I have no regrets about that. So I think it's useful to slow down and rethink when we're in those moments. Like when it didn't turn out the way we were trying to have it turn out, to step back and say, is there another way of doing this? Who might I ask for help or advice? Who can I just run something by? Say, have you got 5 minutes to listen to something that's been on my mind? And why am I being so hard on myself? The question that we should ask throughout the day. We so often fall into those societal pressures, and those those engaged in Toltec wisdom at the time didn't have all the advertising going on, but I'm sure they had bad self-help gurus just like we do. And we often are told in our current culture that we can be anything we want. And the truth is, from my perspective, we can't. There are actual limits. And the first one is the inescapable experience of being human, right? We are limited by our bodies. We are limited by what our minds can do. Boltz-Weber will tell you, having limits is not a failure at being a human being. She says, this is very funny, I can't meditate my way into a personality transplant. And if suddenly looking like someone else is entirely the basis by which I'm going to judge my progress, I am being unnecessarily cruel to myself. I've seen people change, just not in a way that makes them not them anymore. You'll also see on her blog that Nadia Boltz-Weber has been in recovery for 31 years. And she'll be the first to tell you that she's not the same version of herself that stumbled into an AA meeting 31 years ago. She wants you all to know she is unbothered by saying, I am still an alcoholic. She completely owns that she has this vision of the ideal self over here. But she says, I'm still stuck with my actual self over here. And because she's a Christian, she knows that her actual self, this one, is the one that God loves and is the one where God meets her. So if we look at critique our progress by comparing it to perfection or close to perfection, and if you take nothing else home, take this. It's too easy to fail to notice, or at least fail to validate, the changes that come little by little in our personal work. Because I think it's the only way that can be done, is little by little. Things like increasing our trust in others, taking care of our bodies and our emotions, our soul, engaging in deeper and more frequent spiritual practice, stepping out of our comfort zones. Maybe we don't want to be so much of what we are today. I think really the core of us stays the same. I don't think I can change most of my core personality features. I think they're in my DNA. I've spent decades trying to change my initial response, though. Because we can change our responses, we can change our thoughts, and we can change our behaviors as a result of that. When I feel criticized or emotionally threatened, I push back, I defend, and I start planning a really unhelpful response. After decades of spiritual practice, I still go there right away, just like that. It's automatic. But the difference is I spend so much less time there. Sometimes within a split second, I can say, compassionate with yourself first, or you can't give it to the other person. Sometimes it takes a split second. Sometimes it takes a day. And let's just be honest, sometimes it takes weeks and months. But if we're working on it, we finally get there. So I'm getting better and better about getting to the compassionate response more quickly, more easily, and more assuredly. Like I don't lose sleep over it at night anymore. It also means I've taken more risk. So go back to that list in your hands. You've now heard a sermon, you've heard a reading, you've heard a vignette from coaches Roy and Ted. Would you change your list? Would you modify it? Would you think about how you're going to manifest it? Did something shift? So when you take it home with you today, think about those small, modest little steps. Those ones that we need to validate. It's like, I didn't get where I wanted, but I got a little of the way there. I did one thing differently. And if you want some company on the journey, Nadia Bolz-Weber can be found at a website called The Corners. It is a Christian website. You will laugh out loud multiple times, and you can certainly read Judas Can Hear Your Confession now. The Ruiz book is called The Four Commitments, and it's in our lending library, and it's available everywhere. And I think you should also consider the podcasts of Dan Harris, which are titled 10% Happier. The podcasts are really thought-provoking, and he has some really very, very interesting guests. And for me, I'm going with the Bolz-Weber goal of 1%. I'm going to change 1% today because it seems possible to do that most days. Not all days, but most days. And I'll leave you from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Blessed be.